welcome to GTC Insiders. We've got a real special session for you today. Typically in our Insiders, we delve into one specific company or area of the industry of interest, and we have kind of one person join the bridge. Today, I'm delighted to say we're joined by Kaleido Intelligence, and we have two of the founders who will introduce themselves shortly, but the timing's great in that it coincides with the same week in which we have announced our joint venture focused on how we help businesses within the IoT space expand through mergers and acquisitions and consultancy. So I'm delighted to be joined by the founder of GTC, Giovanni, one of the co-founders. We'll run the questions, so we'll have an active conversation. And I'll hand over now to Steffen and John from Kaleido to introduce themselves and talk a bit about their role.
Yeah, thanks, James. It's great to be here with yourself today, and then Giovanni with yourself as well. So, and like you said, the timing aligns very nicely with what we announced to the industry just yesterday. So yes, for myself, for introductions. So my name's John King. I'm one of the founders at Kaleido Intelligence, along with Steffen and our other founder, Nitin Bass, who can join the call today. Myself within the company, within any fast-growing startup, you enjoy wearing some different hats. You know, I think there's two main hats that I tend to wear at Kaleido. Firstly is overseeing our clients' growth. So as a research and advisory firm, you know, in the roaming and cellular IoT space, you know, we work naturally with a lot of MNOs, MVNOs, service providers, you know, around the world. So my first hat is helping those guys to understand what we're doing at Kaleido, come on board and succeed, the important part with the insights that we give. The second part, which is a really fun part as well, I must say, is the commercial oversight of the company as well. So, you know, taking that growth that we're doing and helping it to expand the team, the support, you know, the growth, the resources that we have as we continue to try and do more and more for our clients. So that's a bit about myself. I'll let Steffen introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, John, and James and Giovanni, of course. So I'm Steffen, again, one of the founders of Kaleido, and really with a background in IoT, so Internet of Things. So in that context, you know, my role at Kaleido really is to be the research lead for IoT connectivity. So a lot of research into things like IoT roaming technologies like eSIM, products and solutions surrounding connectivity management, mobile security, and so on. So really, you know, on a day-to-day basis, it's really, you know, it's really about getting engaged and involved with the industry, having conversations, trying to understand where the pain points and challenges are, and of course, producing content around that's useful for our clients, and providing advice on a consultancy basis in terms of, you know, where is the market at? What's a good go-to-market strategy? You know, what kind of stakeholders are strongly positioned to market in the market, and why? And of course, an analyst house wouldn't really be a real analyst house without some numbers behind that. So I'm heavily involved in market sizing and forecasting as well.
Super. So thank you and welcome also from my side. I'm Giovanni, co-founder of GTC. We are super excited about this new partnership with Kaleido Intelligence. And I must say, the announcement which just went out already has triggered some questions. I just came from a client call and they asked me, what is this about? It's really interesting because this client of GTC is also a client of Kaleido Intelligence. And they were telling me that on the roaming side, they're using two suppliers for intelligence and numbers, as Steffen just mentioned. And they definitely prefer the Kaleido numbers because they are less biased and more kind of scientifically proven. So always glad to hear that positive feedback on an announcement. And maybe Steffen, can you give us a view on the current state of IoT roaming, because we want to focus our cooperation specifically on IoT.
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly in the cellular space, and I think, often with IoT as a whole, when you look at how is the market positioned, it's very much international, right? Supply chains are international. Production, sales channels, companies are often targeting multi-regional, multi-country, sometimes even global deployments. So when we look at that as a whole, we do a lot of enterprise surveys. For example, good data point from last year's enterprise surveys, 800 enterprises in there. Only 8% of those respondents said that they really only roll out devices in their own domestic market. So 92% of enterprises are looking to deploy internationally. So that highlights the importance, first of all, of IoT roaming, because essentially roaming is the bedrock for international connectivity in the cellular space. If you want to put some numbers behind that, at the end of 2023, you had roughly 400 million cellular IoT connections roaming globally. Moving towards 2028, we're estimating approximately 1 billion connections will be out there internationally roaming on mobile networks.
So it's not just a hype; it's real numbers that you're reporting. But I'm wondering, how's that evolved over the time? What are the key trends that you're seeing in IoT roaming?
I think I'm happy to jump in here as well, and Steffen, of course, as the expert, can take over afterwards. But I think you talk about how has it evolved. You go back a few years, it was really interesting. Of course, going back to the impact of the pandemic on the roaming ecosystem, right? Because all the people in their roaming business units, they saw that consumer roaming traffic disappear, but the traffic didn't disappear completely because there was this IoT roaming traffic there. And that had been talked about before, but then it was a bit of an eye opener to an extent, because there it is visible on the systems. And I think from there, of course, things have then picked off because you're seeing the traffic. But as Steffen said, when you look to enterprises and their connectivity demands, everything is very much international in how it takes place. Right? You've got a continuous increase in the number of connected devices worldwide. And I think the discussion after seeing the traffic and understanding actually the growth that will happen naturally because of the demand from clients and you're in basically your addressable market, your install base, then goes into a number of areas about how do we enable this, how do we keep them secure, how do we look at things like regulation. That's a question we get asked about a lot at Kaleido that really impacts how are you able to deliver that connectivity on a global footprint. From an internal perspective, how should it be priced? That's been a big area in the roaming industry the last few years. How are we actually meant to be pricing this IoT traffic? Breaking out by the different types of traffic that it's used for as well. So all of these areas, how do we meet, again, things like latency? Some of the enterprises, they demand a really low latency to enable these services. How do we enable that as well? So there's a lot that's then been coming into the pot, that the industry's having to kind of address and work out how do we, I guess, best position ourselves here. I think that's what I see from my side. Let Steffen add or counter it if he likes.
No, it's exactly what you mentioned, John. But I think, COVID was a very interesting time for IoT. I think it provided a good catalyst for enterprises to understand that actually IoT is a very valuable initiative to deal with many of the issues that they were experiencing at the time. So, we saw kind of an explosion in interest in IoT. At the same time, like John mentioned, the operators suddenly saw, we've got all these connections roaming on our networks that we didn't know were there before. So you've got increased demand from the end customer side, but also you've got a change in attitude on the wholesale side. Which means that there are new commercial models being developed, a new competitive environment over time, we've seen the commoditization, for example, of retail connectivity pricing. Wholesale connectivity pricing is also coming down. So what that means is players in the connectivity space, they're having to change strategies and evolve to remain profitable. So I think it's a really exciting area right now. So go back 10 years or so, you would either buy connectivity from a major tier one operator, or perhaps if you were going small scale from a connectivity reseller. Today, you have those two market segments, but also some very advanced and competitive IoT MVNOs who are really driving innovation on the market and offering a solution to end customers who perhaps cannot be targeted by MNOs, who tend to go for larger clients that don't necessarily have the resources to go for, let's say, the long tail of the market. So it's really exciting space to be in right now.
Cool. One other key trend I'm seeing is eSIM. It's like mushrooms after rain. There are so many companies popping up offering eSIM solutions. What is the relationship of eSIM and IoT and roaming that you see?
Maybe I kick this one off. Let's clear up what eSIM means exactly. First of all, unfortunately, the GSMA has dubbed it eSIM, which is, of course, short for embedded SIM. But the fact is, when we talk about eSIM, we're talking about a programmable SIM based on a standardized specification. But some people might see eSIM as just an embedded SIM, so a SIM that's soldered into the device for tamper-proof
I thought it's
reasons.
electronic SIM, by the way.
Well, there you go. Some confusion around all of the lovely acronyms that we use in the industry today. But essentially, the idea is you have a removable or embedded and even integrated SIM technology. So any form factor that can be programmed over the air. That means you don't have to truck roll to replace the SIM if you need it, for example. So the vision initially, I mean, eSIM's been around for well over a decade. The vision initially was, you would swap network operator profiles over the air at will, localized connectivity at will, benefit from local pricing. But the reality is, eSIM really has been an insurance mechanism for companies rolling out IoT solutions. It's actually companies, they don't want the complexity of managing loads of different commercial relationships. They want something that works. eSIM is a technology that enables that. What it also means is that the vast majority of connections using eSIM are in fact roaming on networks today. There's very specific countries, Turkey, for example, China, maybe Brazil as well, where you have specific regulations where you must localize the device. And that's where the original vision of eSIM comes into play. You can download a local operator profile and comply with regulations there. But essentially, eSIM is essentially about choice, avoiding lock-in, providing insurance for long-term viability of IoT connectivity.
And I think just to add to that, there's those distinctions of eSIM and the use cases, the profile use, if you will, that we cover here at Kaleido, because of course what we're talking about a lot, I think especially today, is eSIM and its role within cellular IoT connectivity. Very much, as Steffen said, it's pretty much a paradigm shift in how connectivity can be provisioned and managed. So which is really cool and exciting to see that evolution and the demand and the interest across the industry for that. Of course, there's also the other side, which is more the consumer-facing side of eSIM, and that's an area that is again another colossal area of change in our industry, and especially its impact on the roaming sector.
It's killing the roaming basically, because if I use him,
actually, you hear different sides to it. So there's certainly that sense of threat, I think, from the operator side, that my goodness me, I've got all my millions of subscribers using my roaming tariffs, and they might all be moving to eSIM, and here's just another case of how I'm going to be losing revenues. You have some exciting players in the market who are actually looking at and enabling a different perspective, actually, where say, actually, you have your good rates that are keeping your current subscriber base happy on the main, international routes that they're using. But actually, you've always had a silent roamer population as well who aren't using your, taking up your roaming offerings, and actually position that eSIM correctly. And it can be a great way to actually help monetize those traditional silent roamers. The thing is, it is, and you're right, Giovanni, it's a massively disruptive topic in the industry. It's something that we've actually covered here at Kaleido since probably 2021. And it's been really interesting seeing the continued awareness from the industry. But again, you have such different views across the industry about it. Is this my friend? Is it my enemy? Is it a frenemy? I have to embrace it, but I'll keep it at arm's length. And from our end, again, that's why we do what we do, right? People have their opinions across the industry. Underlying that, we run the research. We just concluded a study with, I think it was 5,000 international travelers worldwide. A mixture of consumer travelers and business travelers. That's the whole point of what we're doing as well. It's saying, right, take the opinions to one side. Let's actually quantify how the awareness from our customers is changing towards eSIM. Are they actually aware of it? We are, in our industry. Is a consumer? Does their device even support it? Do they know how to use it? Do they want to use it? The things like the conversations around security and where your data's going to roam mean anything to a consumer. Do they just want cheap, good connectivity whilst they're overseas? So that's our job, is to do that research and then present that and then add to that into actually who's doing what in the market, what are the innovative solutions, and of course for the operator, what should they be doing about it? Should they be launching their own offerings, maybe sub-branded offerings, going with an aggregator who's providing these services? There's a whole range of offerings there, but that's kind of still eSIM, but it's a whole other dimension to then eSIM on the IoT side. So there's people talk to us about eSIM, and as Steffen said, it's firstly kind of saying, right, so what are we talking about here? What's the profile? What's the use case? Because there's so much that it's enabling and changing in the industry.
Cool. So obviously the Internet of Things, it's a topic that we both focus on, and therefore it's of interest to both of us. But the scaling of IoT has been discussed for a number of years now, and it seems to have reached a point where it's really taken off, and the use cases are coming through. So perhaps we could start with one of our key segments, which is enterprise, talking about kind of some of the challenges that they might face when trying to scale their IoT business. It would be great to hear from you in terms of what you think those challenges are.
Yeah, sure. So I think, let's look at IoT from the ground up. The bedrock of IoT is, of course, connectivity. If you don't have connectivity, you don't have IoT. So we see a lot of challenges specifically related to connectivity support for IoT. I mentioned earlier about the international requirements for IoT connectivity. But really, we don't have the same situation that we do in the mobile phone industry, for example. You can't just pick up a device and expect it to work anywhere in the world. It's simply not how it goes. We have things like regulation, we have bespoke requirements, and we have complexity. And when we look at our survey results towards enterprises, we consistently see pain points along those themes. So a big one, of course, is what's happening in regulation today. I talked a little bit earlier about countries like Brazil, Turkey, China. Now, these have specific regulations with regards to inbound roaming connectivity. You can't just roll it out. You'll be in trouble with the regulators. So there's permanent roaming problems. And there is also a growing number of regulation and compliance requirements surrounding connectivity. So enterprises need to deal with that. At the same time, things like 3GPP, so cellular technologies, are not necessarily familiar to enterprises. They're used to Wi-Fi. So what kind of hardware should they be choosing? How do they develop applications for around that? How can they optimize the connectivity based on their needs? John mentioned low latency earlier, but also in terms of cost optimization. So there's a lot of expertise that's needed from suppliers to help them on that journey, and often they'll look towards connectivity providers for that kind of assistance. And of course, I mentioned technology. When you look at cellular, it's a very, let's say, a very flexible overall solution. You've got anything from very low power radio technologies all the way up to 5G, which is can support ultra high bandwidth connections. But it's especially for IoT connectivity, it's not as simple as, like I said, by getting the device, expecting it to work. You need to understand, where is the coverage, or what's the cost? Is this device suitable? Things like that. So yeah, a lot of education and assistance needed on that side of things to help scale things up.
Perfect. And you're obviously ideally placed to provide a lot of that education.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, we look very closely into the major providers in the industry, whether it's mobile network operators, whether it's mobile virtual network operators, and look very closely in terms of what sort of coverage do they have. Not only in a general sense, you'll often hear, I offer global connectivity to my customers. But what you'll find is that every different provider has a different definition of what global is, depending on their footprint. So we look into that. We also try to understand, can you access difficult geographies on a roaming basis? How do you do that? Is it through eSIM? Is it through multi-IMSI technology? Is it through direct roaming agreements, for example? And also we pay close attention to how these providers are overcoming some of the challenges. How are their platforms positioned? How are their professional services positioned to help reduce time to market, reduce pain points, and offer things to really help accelerate the market as well.
Fantastic. And just so clearly the challenges are huge and very specific depending on that company. Perhaps you could give some examples of how those companies have overcome some of those challenges.
I think that's the overcoming the challenges is more on the provider side, let's say. Right. Okay. The enterprise will go to a service provider and say, look, I want to roll out IoT. But the thing is that it's very, very specific to the use case. So IoT is not one singular industry, or even within a specific vertical. It's not one singular thing. It's very bespoke depending on the enterprise requirements, what they're trying to achieve. So on the service provider side, you really need to have a high level of flexibility, not only on the underlying technology. For example, do you have control of your own mobile network core to, optimize the routing of connections? Do you have a significant position in the market to negotiate favorable wholesale rates, or obtain eSIM profiles or IMSIs from your connectivity partners to help optimize it? But also, do you have some specific vertical knowledge, perhaps, to help your customers understand that, for example, they should be using LTE Cat 1 bis instead of LTE-M because perhaps the coverage where they want to roll out isn't there, or say a low power saving mode isn't necessarily available. So those types of things is what helps these companies understand and roll out a bit more smoothly.
And I think there's two elements there, right, Steffen? Just in addition to that, in the service providers, they have to enable that role of actually problem solvers for their clients, alongside, of course, being experts in the field in which they're operating, because there is that much complexity in enabling those, successful IoT deployments. So it's firstly that side, and I remember speaking not long ago to one of the leading IoT connectivity platform providers, and they were just talking about how actually for them it's they embrace that. They actually really like that, especially when they're working with a large global enterprise, having to sit down and kind of problem solve how they're going to overcome these different hurdles. So that's part one. Part two actually then also ties into the nature of partnerships in this industry as well, because again, given just how massive this IoT space is, given the need to understand different vertical markets, you have some vendors who are designed to enable specific verticals, automotive, healthcare, logistics, because they each have different requirements. Then you have other firms who specialize in I guess on the solution side, being able to, for instance, enable the security element of the market, SIM provisioning. So there's different companies doing different elements. And what we then see is the need for partnerships in this industry to bring those different elements together to enable the client. And that kind of speaks to as well what we're doing together between ourselves and obviously GTC, being able to help enable those partnerships and help companies come together to ultimately better enable the customer moving forward.
So that's the perfect segue, but we're not quite there yet.
Setting you up for later.
We've got one bit more of kind of questions, because I feel like we're really getting into kind of the IoT space, but that partnership and how we help customers kind of enable and grow through M&A will come on to. It's perfect, John. But just before we do that, Steffen, you spoke about cellular a little bit and kind of that becoming cemented as a key IoT technology. Perhaps you could talk through kind of the signs and efforts that you're seeing within the ecosystem to help kind of the role of cellular enabling kind of IoT in the future.
Yeah, I mean, to begin with, if you want to roll out devices internationally, for wide area networks, there's no better technology to do it with than cellular. But we've talked about some of the problems that exist today. And of course, the industry recognizes it and is working towards that. So I mentioned eSIM earlier. There's some exciting stuff going on with eSIM right now, a new specification that's specifically designed for IoT use cases, specifically targeting, let's say, IoT-specific devices of things like those running on batteries or not necessarily using IP technology stacks. So that's being rolled out. We should see that emerging towards the beginning of next year. That's really going to help increase the choice on the market. So today, eSIM is for very specific use cases. Next year, eSIM is going to be for every IoT use case. So we'll start to see that become de facto and really ensure a long-term viability. Another interesting thing that's happening, of course, is the convergence of cellular technology and satellite technology. So satellite is obviously big. You hear a lot about Starlink and things. They are starting to move into IoT. There's new standards that have been developed to start the convergence of cellular and satellite. So you can have a single device that can connect to the mobile network in normal use cases, but when it goes out of range of terrestrial network, it can then use satellite too. So then you really will have true global coverage. There's some other things that are going on, for example, on in-factory provisioning of connectivity for eSIM and iSIM. It's a little complex topic to go into now, but I think the point is that there are a lot of building blocks that are happening on the back end, not only with the technology but also with the commercials to properly identify devices, monetize them correctly, that will really help not only drive adoption on the customer side, but also start realizing some really good profitability on the supply side as well. So I think it's a very exciting time.
Yeah,
yeah, amazing. All these new dynamics in the IoT space. And I think just looking back at the messaging space, which GTC comes from, it started like 5 years ago that a lot of consolidation happened because the market was maturing on the messaging side. And so big companies bought little companies, sometimes little companies bought bigger companies. And we as GTC are very happy to support the industry in also this M&A processes with doing due diligence and so forth. And that, I think, was also the main idea of our partnership, our new partnership that we announced now, which is to help in the IoT space to do a similar M&A services portfolio. And I was wondering, maybe you can talk more about the dynamics you're seeing in the IoT space. Is there the bigger companies buy the smaller ones, or what is happening on a company-wide level?
Shall I jump in here quickly? I think, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's becoming increasingly competitive to play in this market. 10 years ago, tier one operator, reseller, something like that. Today, very competitive IoT MVNO market. But at the same time, pressures on the retail connectivity pricing and wholesale connectivity pricing. So there's a lot of activity that's going on where not only it's very difficult to develop in-house technologies, often takes a long time. There's a lot of opportunity here to acquire specific technologies. And we've seen that among several different companies in the industry where they will, for example, acquire a player to, let's say, acquire some eSIM technology to support operations and increase flexibility. Other areas that we've seen acquisitions in is to gain specific platform capabilities to drive, for example, automotive or connected vehicle use cases. So yeah, those are just a couple of examples, but I think we're going to see more and more of this as it goes along, especially as the environment becomes more and more competitive to get hold of customers.
And coverage and market share aren't the typical M&A drivers, at least on the messaging side. Is that the same in IoT?
Yeah, I mean, we have conversations with companies already who are looking to expand. Maybe they want to expand their footprint of connections that they're managing. Maybe they want to expand their local connectivity in certain markets they want to expand to. So it's great then having that company there on the ground enabling that, again, helping that market share. So 100% you have that angle. Then you have almost helping the technology stack angle, as Steffen has said as well. So you have these different perspectives that people are coming at this from, because ultimately, as Steffen said, it's a very competitive market. So as we know in any line of business, when you're in a competitive market, you need to be moving quickly. You need to have offerings that, are very robust and not just competitive now, but they're future-proofed, based on, the new technology standards that are coming up, anticipated future client demand. We talk about areas like security as well. So, there's so much there that we know that, a lot of the players in this industry, are actively looking at this because there's a lot of agile new companies coming up that might be helping that, that technology stack, that platform features, enabling new platform features. Great. That's one angle. And then the other side, as you said, it's actually just boosting that market share. It's boosting, how robust they are in their different target regions or verticals as well. So there's certainly plenty of anticipated future M&A coming together in this space for sure.
So as Giovanni said right at the start, we're super excited, and we've obviously been talking for quite a long time now, months, about how we bring this together. And we will come to some personal questions towards the end, because I know that's always a good part for people to get to know you a bit better. So be ready for that. We haven't prompted questions there. You'll be glad to hear. But let's talk a bit about the collaboration and what it means, because the beauty of this joint venture is that the companies fit together so well. You've heard on this call the intelligence that Kaleido have in masses around this topic, which dovetails beautifully into our consulting and M&A experience. And therefore, bringing the companies together was really a very simple decision. And the fact that we don't have to invest and don't need to do anything radically different means that we can help our existing customers and new almost immediately. So let's talk a bit about kind of the benefits to some of your IoT customers. And Giovanni, you mentioned obviously a customer that you had been speaking to. That was a customer of both of our companies. Perhaps we can talk a bit about specific examples of how we can help benefit IoT.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd almost want to just take a step back to add to that as well, because obviously, Kaleido is actually our 5th year as a Kaleido this year, actually. So, young, quickly growing company, but ever since we started, that mantle of how we want to do business is all about collaboration. Being in the industry, coming together where it's applicable, and that can be through the work we do as members of companies like GSMA or Mobile Ecosystem Forum or the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance, but also again, those partnerships that we have. We partner with roaming training companies, we partner with a messaging research company that fits our portfolio very well, and obviously this partnership with yourself. This is our mantle, and like you said, James, it's very complementary in what we're doing, bringing this together from our side, that knowledge and understanding, not just of the market and the roadmap, but also the different types of players that fill in different elements. And of course, from GTC, it's already very well established success of enabling those managed services and M&A in the messaging space. I mean, this is just a perfect bringing together. So like you said, some months of talking, but very aligned, I think, from the off about how this could work.
And I think one of the glue elements, which are fundamental parts of our DNA and your DNA, is the trust that our clients are putting into us. Because M&A is only working if, M&A is a very confidential process where a company exposes itself to another company, potentially even to the competing company. So if you don't have full trust in the partners that you're working with in that process, you won't succeed. So that's what excites me, that I felt that we kind of were in different industries, but adjacent industries. But the common thing is that all our clients are trusting the services that we have been providing so far, and therefore also going forward.
Precisely. And it's lovely hearing that feedback as well, Giovanni, from you said, the client you spoke to at the outset as well. Because again, and I think with yourselves, like us, with any growing business, that trust and confidence in the process that you go through is fundamental. You're not going to get far without taking the right approach from day one and establishing that trust. Right? And I think enabling that moving forward through this joint venture is absolutely paramount, and I'm fully confident that will resonate and be evident to everyone that we work with. Going to your question, James, about who we see that enabling and how, you have a few different audiences that, of course, we're very well engaged within this space. You have from the operator side, you have MNOs, who, of course, GTC has a very good footprint already working with the MNO community. The same with us, but I think we know as part of their own offerings, we're often looking to companies that they would want to be acquiring. You have, as Steffen said, IoT MVNOs. Again, a very competitive space, full of partnerships, full of ongoing acquisitions. And of course, you then also have, for instance, the investment firms who are wanting to get involved in this, and we've recently been involved in such a project. And from our end, of course, it's bringing that knowledge of the market to help them understand the reality, of the market. Again, it goes back to, I think we touched on the point of hype at the very start of the call. You can imagine as many firms looking into this industry. You could look at, it goes to market data. There's a lot of market research firms. Some make a living, I would almost say, off nice hyped market data. Sounds great to an investment firm, and he's going to his manager talking about the upside, but then they invest and then they say, well, where's my return? So it's given that reality about it is a growing market, but what are those processes looking like? When can you expect to be turning a profit on the investment? What do you have to be considering? What do you have to make sure you're enabling for the company you're investing in as well? So it's helping understand those different boxes for our clients. It's helping them to grow on their roadmap. And again, it's that combination, as we said at the outset, the knowledge from our side, and from GTC, it's that experience in that right process to do those, due diligence processes, to have that, managed off in that wider combined consulting that we've both been doing from different angles, just to help those roadmaps to come together ultimately, so whoever we're working with, will be succeeding in their long-term vision.
And the other aspect I'd like to add is the best practices, because we are seeing so many different clients and industry players who consult us, and at the same time we learn what they've done well and see what they might have should be doing better. So I think we are uniquely positioned both together to combine all of these best practices that we've been seeing over the years, and basically creating the essence of these best practices in the service that we're providing together, so that an M&A transaction is really seeing the absolute value, or also determining that it doesn't make sense to bring these two companies together. That is also a very valid due diligence result, and we definitely try to be as objective as possible, so that the overall result then makes sense.
Very good. So this is the point where we get in terms of couple of personal questions. Hopefully you've all found this interesting, and we especially have, listening to kind of Steffen and John. And just before we get into that, thank you guys. That was a really brilliant insight into the market. I'm saying that now because you might not thank me for the personal questions thereafter. So, so John, I was watching the US Open recently, and Bryson DeChambeau, the commentators wondered how the players now, like Bryson, can combine such huge length off the tee with such a subtle touch around the green. And having seen you play, I thought you could relate that to some of the more amateur players, because you're very long off the tee, but you've got a lovely touch around the green. So
that's extremely complimentary for a personal question, and slightly misleading, I think. But yeah. Who knows? Like, the long game is almost swing and hope strategy sometimes, as we found out when we played together. But
I only saw pictures of people looking for balls. So
that's a big part of playing, Giovanni.
I think if you're going to spend the money to go onto a golf course, you want to take advantage of all of the golf course. Where's the fun in just walking up the middle?
The corners, the centers, and so forth.
Precisely. I think a lot of the beauty is in those trees. It's in the shrubs. It's in the sand. You have to, make the most of it.
Yeah, and so our friend Nick Lane from Mobile Squared, who joined us that day, knows all about those corners of the golf course. And Steffen, it's obviously we've been talking, as I mentioned, for some time. And it's funny that you're in roaming, because we know that you like a holiday. So perhaps you could share kind of your next holiday with the audience, a bit of detail.
It's funny you should mention that, because I'm actually going on holiday on Monday.
All right.
To Italy. This is not my fault. Right. My mother-in-law is coming, and she's from Brazil. And let's say the last time she was in the UK, it was summer, and she was dressed up in a very warm jacket, woolly hat. And so essentially when she comes to visit, that means that we have to take her to somewhere warmer. So we're off to Italy for a few days.
Which part of Italy?
Milan to Lago Maggiore.
All right, nice. Very good.
Yes. Yeah. So I hold my hands up and say I always do seem to be on holiday, but that's only because of John and him failing to organize our meetings properly ahead of time.
Probably. I still
setup.
hold that you just, we'll all be at the MVNO World Congress next week, in Brussels. So I'll be thinking of you.
I'll be there in spirit while I'm sipping on a wine.
And in Italy, why not? And the final point I think we have to mention is the Euros. And Giovanni, I know you from an Italy perspective, obviously not looking as good as Spain and Germany at the moment. So you might be changing your allegiance to Germany, I imagine. But John and Steffen, any advice you can give to the England team after our poor opening displays?
This is a session for another copy the Germans more, I think. So I'm curious to hear them for Giovanni. So Giovanni, because you're based out in Germany.
I'm Italian. I was born in Italy, but I grew up most of my life in Germany, married to a German wife. So I'm European, I would say. But in terms of football, I root for Italy, but sometimes I have to go to my backup team, which is Germany.
I was about to ask about where your allegiance lies there. You've answered it already, So backup team. Hey, that will serve you quite well moving into the tournament. I wish England had a backup team. Who's the English backup team?
Ireland,
Scotland?
normally, but more for the rugby. That helps, John.
Right. So Scotland?
Scotland.
I think Scotland is
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
So we've probably reached the end of this point and need to curb our supporting of other international teams at this point. And just to say thank you to Steffen and John. I hope the audience can really see the kind of the gelling of the companies here. I certainly have felt that through the call and in all of our conversations. And I just want to say thank you for joining us this morning and have a great weekend.
Yeah, no, thanks, James and Giovanni. And hopefully for those watching, very helpful as well. But no, we're really looking forward to the next steps. And I guess the message is watch this space, right, for the more announcements that we make on our joint venture in the coming months.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, guys.